Hello aspirants, welcome to another session of the daily newspaper analysis. This video is brought to you by the Gurudev Academy. This is the brief introduction about me. Before we move ahead, one important announcement that a new batch is going to start for IAS, KAS, PSI as well as banking. It is going to start from August 5th. So please call us and please inquire and enroll. So moving ahead, these are the topics that we are going to look at. Today is a very important newspaper. There is a lot of information given. So please be aware and please concentrate on the topics that we are going to do. Before we moving ahead, we look at the questions that were given in the yesterday's newspaper. Who has recently brought in MICA to regulate cryptocurrency? See, this was given in the editorial. A very important legislation which is going to regulate the cryptocurrency. So India can have a model law on cryptocurrency based on this MICA. This has been introduced by the EU, that is your European Union. Secondly, which of the following countries border China? Okay, which of the following countries border China here? The answer here is Laos. The answer here is Laos. See, China is in news, so please look at the bordering countries and as well as the seas and the oceans that cover China here. Third, what is the term of enforcement directorate? See, this has been in news. There has been a controversy regarding this. The answer here is 3 years. Okay, so there has been a controversy. The Supreme Court, there has been a petition filed. So we'll look ahead if any changes are being made regarding the tenure here. Which country was the first recipient of the Covishield vaccine produced by the Serum Institute of India? See, the Maldivian president is in India. There has been several talks going on. Maldives was the first country, okay, which received the first doses of Covishield. Okay, which the first doses of Covishield was exported to Maldives here. Moving ahead, we look at the first news here. The first article here talks about India to host UNSC meet on counter-terrorism. See, India is a member of UN Security Council, but UN Security Council here is made up of 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members. Okay, it is made up of 5 permanent members as well as 10 non-permanent members. India for now is a non-permanent member. Okay, it is a non-permanent member, and here it is not the first time that India has been elected as the non-permanent member of UNSC. It is the 8th time, and India will be serving a term of 2 years. Starting from 2021, the term will end in 2022. The 2-year term has already started, and under it, India is going to host this UNSC meet on counter-terrorism. This UNSC counter-terrorism committee, okay, it is headed by Indian envoy, that is T.S. Tirumurthy. Okay, it is headed by T.S. Tirumurthy. So all the 15 countries officials are going to be here. This article also mentions something about comprehensive convention on international terrorism. Okay, this is a very important move for India. This has been proposed by so many foreign ministers right from this was first proposed in 1996, but it became vocal during the term of Sushma Swaraj. So we'll just look at few of the provisions here. What are the main provisions of this CCIAT, that is your Comprehensive Convention of International Terrorism? See, firstly it talks about definition of terrorism. See, terrorism is hard to stop, it is hard to control because there is no proper definition of terrorism. Some act may be considered as a terrorist act, for some it is not considered as a terrorist act. So there has to be a universal definition on terrorism is what is the intention of CCIAT here. It also talks about ban on all terror groups. Okay, so the UNSC has not banned few of the terror groups because of the opposition from China. Okay, China has veto power using it. Some of the terrorists as well, like Hafiz Saeed, is not designated as a terrorist because China is opposing this. So when CCIAT will be adopted, all the terror groups as well as all the terrorists will be banned here. Then the prosecution of the terrorists, okay, there has to be a law, international law, which will prosecute the terrorists here. Then make cross-border terrorism an extraditable offense. See, India is the victim of cross-border terrorism. So India mainly focuses on this issue that whoever is involved in cross-border terrorism, they should be extradited to the country where this act takes place. This is again important because most of the terrorism that happened, terrorist acts that happened in India, it was a result of the cross-border terrorism that was taking place from Pakistan So this is again very important. So we will look ahead if the UNSC, that is the Security Council, adopts this CCIAT here. Moving ahead, so the next article that we are looking at is the Lok Sabha passes bill to set up Gati Shakti University. See, again, as I've told you in the previous videos as well, the parliament session is on. So please make some time and look at the session. I want you all to look at the functioning of how the parliament functions, what are the different procedures that are followed in the process of a parliament. So please make some time and look at the proceedings here. So we look at this Gati Shakti bill, what it talks about. See, we already have this National Rail and Transport University in Vadodara. Okay, we already have this. So this bill has been brought in to change the nature of this National Rail and Transportation University. Okay, so what is the intention of the bill here? The bill has been named as Central University Amendment Bill 2022. Okay, here the intention is that this bill changes the nature of this National Rail Transport University. Now it will not just include the rail, it will also include all types of transport sector, that is your railway, road, waterways, aviation, port, along with information technology. Okay, so what is the I'll repeat again. So this Central University Amendment Bill 2022 has been brought in to change the characteristics of this National Rail and Transport University of Vadodara. What has been changed is that this university, which was just focusing on railways and training on railways, it is going to include all the modes of transport, that is your railway, road, waterways, aviation and port, along with the information technology. This is what you have to learn. This is what you have to read from this article here. Moving on, another important development, that is Suresh Patel is the new CVC. 2 commissioner takes charges. Okay, so CVC, the head of the CVC, the post has been vacant from so many years. So now it has been fulfilled. Now the CVC is back to its full strength. We'll just briefly look at what CVC is and what is the mode of appointment, how it is appointed here, how they are appointed. So CVC, that is the Central Vigilance Committee Commission. Sorry, it is the main work here is vigilance. Okay, vigilance here we mean that to look after that the administration is proper and there is no any sort of corruption that is happening here. The CVC was established after the recommendation of K. Santanam Committee, very important committee again. Okay, K. Santanam Committee, very important committee. They recommended the establishment of CVC here. CVC is an independent body. Okay, it is not under the charge of any ministry here. It is an independent body and it comes under the charge of only the parliament. Okay, it comes under the charge of parliament. Here the CVC, the structure of CVC is 1+2. 1+2, I mean that there is one chief commissioner and there is 2 other commissioners that are present in CVC. The term is 4 years. Okay, the term is 4 years or 65 years, whichever comes first. Okay, then this CVC is appointed by the president. Okay, here you can see that the president has administered the oath here. So the president appoints the CVC here on the recommendation of a committee which comprises of 3 members. That is your Prime Minister, Ministry of Home Affairs, as well as leader of opposition from the Lok Sabha. Okay, they recommend the name for the CVC and he is appointed by the president here. Here, once the term is completed by the CVC, not eligible for the reappointment. Okay, they are not eligible for the reappointment. Please remember one important point, that is this one, that is it is an independent body and it does not come under the charge of any ministry. It is independent body and it comes only under the charge of the parliament here. Very important point. Okay, moving ahead. One more important news that has come in today's newspaper, that is Centre raises fair prices for sugarcane harvest. Okay, firstly I have to understand what fair price is. See, as how we have MSP, that is your minimum support price that is given to farmers. We have FRP, okay, that is fair and remunerative price. Okay, fair and remunerative price. This is given only for the sugarcane. Okay, it is only given for the sugarcane. So what is FRP? The farmers. Okay, the farmers usually sell their sugarcane produce to the sugar mills here. Okay, to the sugar mills, and the sugar mills have to buy the produce, the sugarcane produce at FRP. That is your fair and remunerative prices here. This fair and remunerative prices is announced by the CCEA, that is your Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. This Cabinet Committee is headed by the Prime Minister. Okay, it is headed by the Prime Minister, but the recommendation is again from the CACP, that is Commission on Agricultural Prices. Okay, that committee recommends the prices to the CCEA, which is headed by the Prime Minister, and the CCEA announces the prices. So please keep it in mind, that one. So this year the price has been 290 rupees per quintal. The amount is not important for you all. Okay, the amount never becomes important for you all. You have to understand the concept of FRP, who announces it and who recommends it. Okay, see, this FRP is announced under Essential Commodities Act. Okay, it is announced under Essential Commodities Act. Hence, it is the obligation and it is compulsory for the farmers to give their produce to the sugar mills in 14 days. Otherwise, penalties will be put on the farmers here. They have to transport the sugar cane produce in 14 days to the sugar mills. That is what is the intention of this act here. Okay, moving ahead. So we will come to the editorials now. The first editorial here talks about the public asset sale and the concern of fiduciary duty here. So this is talking about the Air India sale that took place recently. Some important points are given. We'll just look ahead. I'll just give you the crux of the article again. Okay, my job here is not to explain the article. I'm just going to give you the overall picture of the article. It is your duty to read the article. Okay, I'm going to explain few important points which is going to make the reading easy for you all. Okay. So here what the argument is about the sale of the private asset as well as the public asset. Firstly, you look at the article. Firstly, we look at the nature of the sale. What was the actual sale happening? See, the Air India was sold at 18,000 crores here. Okay, 18,000 crores. Under it, 15,300 crores. Okay, 15,300 crores. The debt was retained by Tata here. Okay, Tata Group, to which the Air India was sold, and 2,700 crores. Okay, 2,700 crores was paid to the government here. Okay, was paid to the government here, and here, okay, and here the government had established something called a special purpose vehicle. Okay, special purpose vehicle was established. It was looking at the debts. Okay, it was looking at the debts. Air India had so much debts. We all know what is the condition of Air India. So this special purpose vehicle, which was looking after the debts here, it is going to retain all the 46,262 crores. Okay, all the debts that was there, it was going to be retained again by the special purpose vehicle only. So what it means here is that not the Air India sale, what it took place, the Air India was not sold, only the assets of Air India was sold. The assets like the routes of the plane, okay, some of the assets, the land assets of Air India, only these was sold, not the complete Air India was sold here. So again, the author makes an argument between the difference of a sale of an enterprise as well as sale of an asset. Okay, see, whenever a sale of asset takes place, okay, what happens is there are two sides, that is liability as well as assets. Okay, liabilities are your debts. Okay, debts and known obligation. Assets are your physical assets. Okay, they may be, in the case of now when we look at Air India, it is physical assets, maybe land, okay, planes, or the routes. Okay, the routes. Fine. So what happened in the case of Air India was the government has sold the asset and has retained the liability side. Why? Because what happens is, when you sell the assets at higher prices, at competitive prices, what will happen is it will balance the liabilities that are present here. Like in this case, what the government did was it has sold the asset at such high prices that it can balance out the liabilities it has. Fine. So this was the intention of the sale. Please remember that the Air India has not been completely sold. Only the assets have been sold here. Fine. So when moving ahead, the author talks about the private asset sale versus public asset sale here. Okay, they talk about public asset sale versus the private asset sale. There is a lot of difference when we look at it. When private asset is sold, there is independent checks and balances. The people who are going to invest in this asset, okay, they are going to look at if this asset is profitable, if investing in such asset, if buying such asset is going to be profitable to the company overall. But when we look at public asset sale, okay, when a government is selling the public asset, the public asset, here there is no proper investigation or checks or balances. Normally when a public asset is sold, who is the creditor here? The banks. Okay, the banks are the creditors here. So what happens during public asset sale is, like in the case of Air India, the debt that already the Air India has, it is assured by the sovereign government here. That is, the government here is assuring that we are going to pay all the debts that Air India took place. What is the implication of this? The implication of this is that when the debts are owed by the government, the citizens, the normal citizens, have to pay for the debts from their pocket in the form of taxes again. Fine. So this is the difference between private asset sale and public asset sale. The author here asks the government to be very careful, since we are going through something called as national monetization policy. Firstly, what is national monetization policy? Here, monetization policy is loss making assets. Okay, like which government assets or companies are under loss making, the government is going to monetize them and sell them. Okay, that is what the intention of national monetization plan is. So when we are going to sell all the public asset here, when we are going to sell all the public asset here under national monetization plan, the burden will normally fall on the Indian citizens here, because we are going to pay for the debt that has been taken by these companies and the enterprises in the form of taxes, is what the author is arguing here. Nextly, the author talks about consultation of state. See, under Article 1, as we have seen, Article 1 defines the territory of the India. Here, when we talk about the Air India sale, the Air India here also had land owned by it in some other states. Fine. So when the states were not consulted in the sale of the assets of Air India, it is violating cooperative federalism. Okay, it is violating cooperative federalism, is what the author is arguing here. Nextly, it talks about mixed economic model. See, we Indians follow mixed economy. We are not socialist, we are not capitalist economy, but we follow mixed social model. What does the mixed economic model here mean? The mixed economic model here encourages private partnership where government fails or finds it very difficult to operate. Like the author here has given the example, when there was a time of COVID, and when Indian citizens were living abroad, like in the case of Middle East, Air India played a major role in bringing back those Indians to our country. Even Air India has played a major role in connecting to the remote places as well. Fine. So when such public assets are also providing and also doing public welfare, the government has to be very careful when it is trying to sell the assets. The author here also argues that in the case of these public assets sale, caution has to be taken when the sale is being done to few selected companies or few favored companies, and the welfare of the whole country has to be looked after, is what the author is arguing here. So this is the article. I want you all to read the article. The article is very straight. You can understand it in easy go. Please follow this model when you are reading. I have explained the importance of this article as well as what are the important points of this article. Please concentrate on those article points. I have ignored electoral bond because I don't feel it is a right take on this public asset sale. So you can ignore the electoral bond issue that has been given in the article there. Okay. Moving on. So here, reaping the demographic dividend. See, demographic dividend, firstly we have to understand what demographic dividend is. Demographic dividend is the maximum working age population in the age group of 15 to 64 years. Okay, 15 to 64 years. If there is maximum age people living, then that is called as a demographic dividend. We have been talking a lot about this demographic dividend. The article also has given few important points. Like firstly, it talks about India's potential. Firstly, we talk about the World Population Prospect Report that has been published by the UN. Okay, UN publishes this. According to it, the next 30 years, India is going to be having a proper demographic dividend. That is, the working age population will be higher than the aged population. Fine. So this is what the article is talking about. Nextly, when we look at the India's potential, there are few companies. Okay, there are few companies that have come out and spoken about the India's demographic dividend. Like Deloitte here talks that workforce of 1.08 billion for the next 2 decades here. Okay, that is because the present workforce, okay, the present workforce that is going to come up in the next 2 decades will be better trained than the already workforce that is there. Okay, and the companies like McKinsey and company have also talked that factors like urbanization, digitalization, okay, this is also helping the workforce, and this will result in 30% of the non-farm jobs. Okay, non-farm jobs are very important for a country, and the factors like digitalization, urbanization are going to support the 30% of the non-farm jobs, as well as it is going to create 2.5 trillion of economic value by 2030. Okay, but everything is not on the gloomy side. Some of the reports like the Financial Times have said that bad infrastructure and poor skilled workforce is impinging. It is not helping the demographic dividend to earn more. It is pulling the demographic dividend back. Okay, it is not helping us, is what some of the reports are given in the article here. Then when we talk about the comparison between China and India, China and India are always compared. See, China, before it started its industrial revolution, or before it started its economic growth, it went through two important phases, that is Great Leap as well as the Cultural Revolution. Okay, this had a lot of impact on the society of China, but we Indians have not faced any such issues. In our country, still mass protests are in demand. Still, the demands are being recognized by the government and are worked by the government. So even during the time of COVID, okay, we realized that how much of digitalization has helped us. Instant messaging as well as video conferencing has enabled us so much that we still are, even after COVID, people are working from home here. Okay, so such factors show that the Indian technology is matured, and we have already started the industrial revolution, and the starting point from where we look at the industrial revolution. Okay, the industrial revolution, when we look at the starting point from China and for India, India is very much well placed at its starting point because of the technological revolution that has already took place in India. So the author here says that when we look at the starting point for India and China, when it comes to industrial growth, India is better placed here. Lastly, the author talks about the Huqiu system. Okay, Huqiu system here means that the Chinese system, it is one of the Chinese system where the rural people, the rural population is on the higher side in China. That is, your 64% of the rural area is 64% of the population is in rural area here. Okay, so this is not visible in India, because we are very much well connected. There is not much of a divide between urban and rural population. We see a mass migration happening from rural to urban areas in search of population, and we have urban agglomeration. That is, the urban population is increasing. Fine. So this is also not present in India, and this may also help in our economic growth, is what the author is arguing here. Lastly, the author talks about the importance of human resource development. That is, the governments here have to spend in trillions, okay, when it comes to health and education, is what the author is arguing in the last. Okay, so these are the areas that the government should be concentrating to reap the demographic dividend, that is, to make profit out of the already huge demographic dividend that is present, as well as in the coming decades, is what the author argues at the last. Okay, that's all. So this is the last article of the day. Here, cabinet notes for climate change. See, we have done INDCs already in the previous video. Please look at the INDCs. What is INDC? Intended National Determined Contributions. These are announced by every government as to how much of greenhouse gas as well as emissions as well as renewable energy they are going to inculcate in their economy. So last year the Prime Minister made an announcement in COP26, that is in Glasgow. Okay, Glasgow, about their updated INDCs. Okay, India has updated their INDCs and they are called as Panchamrit. Okay, Panchamrit, 5 INDCs. So they have been named as Panchamrit. Along with this, there is another important article that has come up where there are 10 new wetlands. Okay, 10 new wetlands which will be under Ramsar Convention. Okay, so previously in last video we saw how the original was 49 Ramsar sites, 5 were added, so the numbers increased to 54, and now it has been 10 have been added more, so total it is 64 now. So please keep it in mind. Right now in India there are 64 Ramsar sites, and under this 10 new Ramsar sites, 6 will be from Tamil Nadu, 1 is from Goa, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh and Odisha. Okay, so Karnataka gets its first Ramsar site here. Okay, Karnataka gets its first Ramsar sites. Looking at the Panchamrit, okay, these are the Panchamrit. I want you all to note all these down. That is, India will reach its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. India will meet 50%. As I've told you, India has already reached 40%. Okay, so they have updated it. So India will meet 50% of its energy requirement for renewable energy by 2030. Okay, the year and the targets are very important here. Okay, the questions may be asked in such a way that the years and the targets may be changed. So please look at be very careful when you're reading the years as well as the targets. The third one, India will reduce the total projected carbon emission by 1 billion tons from now onwards till 2030. Okay. By 2030, India will reduce the carbon intensity of this economy by less than 45%. Okay, by 2030, and again by year 2070, very important year for India. 2070, India will achieve target net zero. Net zero here means net zero is not only reducing emission, it is also about carbon sinks. Okay, so whatever the emission of carbon will be done, equivalent amount of carbon sinks will be created so that they absorb the carbon that is being emitted here. Okay, these are the five updated INDCs. I want you all to concentrate on this. Please look at the years as well as the targets, very important here. Okay, so that's it from today's video. Please write the answers at the end of the video. There will be questions posted. Do follow us on the social media handles, that is on YouTube, Telegram, Instagram as well as on Facebook. Thank you.